So, I thought in celebration of the Oktoberfest that didn't actually happen this year, which also would have finished last weekend, not this weekend, I thought we'd cook something traditional, something traditional German, something traditional you might find at Oktoberfest. So, we're going to cook pretzels. Okay? Now, quite a few little stages to pretzels. It's effectively a dough, like a bread dough, but not quite the same as your normal making a loaf. Okay, and it has this other little extra step. So, for today, what you're going to need is some strong white bread flour, 570 grams. You're going to want a sachet of dried yeast and 2 teaspoons of salt and 2 tablespoons of butter slightly softened. I need to let that soften up a little bit more. And we're going to need some warm water, 360 mils of that. So that's all we're going to need to make the basic pretzel. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so my flour's already in my bowl, and I'm just going to tip in my salt. I'm going to sprinkle in my yeast. Okay, and tip in my butter. Right, so oops, get in there. Now we just want to lightly combine that. I know the butter's not really going to combine that well. At this stage, get flour everywhere. Don't want to get down the lederhosen, do I? Right. And then I apologise background and all the noise. By the way, wife decided to put the washing. Not plain that she's doing the washing, just does it wrong when I'm about to do something. Anyway, so I'm going to tip the water in, and essentially, apart from sort of a special stage later on, that's all that goes into it. Well, obviously we're going to be putting some salt on it. These are going to be your typical salty sort of savoury pretzels. And while we're talking about pretzels, obviously pretzels are something that the Germans sort of claim as theirs, if you like, but they do go back a long way, and no one's really sure. That's going to go on a spin now. Perhaps not. It goes back quite a long way in history, and one of the earliest records is to do with a monk. Okay, it's about 1610. Okay, and just try and break the butter up. The butter's not quite melted enough yet, but we'll get there. Anyway, this monk, he had some dough left over, and he thought, I know what I'll do. I've got my little boys, my little catechism students, and they deserve a little treat. I think it's more just to keep them a bit sweet so that they carried on doing what they're meant to be doing. But anyway, he supposedly, here we go, getting up the spin, probably overloading it, make a right bloody racket. So all I'm doing at this stage is just trying to get it all mixed through, get that butter all spread through. Okay. You notice there's no sugar, by the way, in this. Anyway, back to our story. He set about rolling out the dough he had, and he folded it over. So he had it like a little strip. He folded it over as a symbol of the crossed arms in prayer, and that supposedly was the invention of the pretzel. Although he called them pretiola, well, that's one story. Pretiola in Latin meant little arms, which is essentially what he was representing. Parents, they sort of got a bit popular, and parents were given to children as a treat, and they became known as brachiola, again little arms. But by the time they got to Germany, because this wasn't in Germany, this was Italy, by the time they got to Germany, the Germans were calling them Pretzels, right? So that's fun for you. It does also fit in with the fact that pretzels are quite common in sort of religious sort of things, rewards or symbols or whatever. So that would fit in a little bit with the story of the monk, but that's not the only origin story. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to pause there till I get this all just about mixed in, and then we'll carry on with making the pretzels and the story. Alright. Okay, so we're getting there now. We're just going to knead it, make sure all that butter's thoroughly mixed through, and it should be quite a sort of smooth, elastic dough by the time we finished. It's not sticky like our bread doughs normally are. Okay, and we don't want a wet dough, we don't want it too sticky. When we finish, we should, well, I might need just a little touch more flour to this. Just going to roll this on an unfloured surface. Anyway, let's get back to a different origin story, and this takes us back a few hundred years. Okay, in Germany, where the famous royal baker Frieder, I think his name was, who was sort of like almost like the court baker, if you like, and he was well popular because he made some nice, delicious things. However, he fell out with the count, who was basically his boss, you know, the master of the area, which is a bit of a silly thing to do, because basically he said, right, I'm locking you up and you're going for the chop. So I don't know quite what it was he did to upset him. I'm just going to add a little bit of flour to this, getting a bit sticky. So there is old Frieder, locked up in the dungeons, awaiting his sentence, and his wife obviously is obviously upset. She obviously was in love with him, alright? And she goes off to see the count and pleads for mercy. So the count sort of had a little think again, and he thought, well, you know, he did upset me, but if I chop his head off, then I'm not going to be able to get any more of these delicious bakery treats. And he decided the best thing to do then was, instead of giving him the chop, he said, right, I'll give you a chance to redeem yourself. I'm going to let you go, okay? I'm going to let you go, but it's on the condition that within 3 days you produce for me a delicious baked treat, if you like, that I have never seen before, never tasted before. I've got to like it. And he said, I want to better see the sunshine through it 3 times a day. Don't know where you got that idea from. A bit weird, isn't it? But anyway, let's tip this out now. So he got set free and off he went, and he's thinking, what on earth am I going to do? He got to 2 days had gone and he just hadn't come up with any new ideas. It got to be something completely new that he never cooked in before. So got to the 3rd day and he thought, well, let's have a go. He said, well, I'm a baker, so let's bake something. He said, but I'm not going to put sugar in it because I know the count don't like sweet things. So I'm going to add some salt. Hence the reason this dough is free of sugar, as it were. Okay, we made it some salt in it. Right, so what I'm going to do now with that dough, just going to leave that now, and we're going to let that rest for about 5 minutes. So not like your normal like hour rise or whatever. We're going to let that rest 5 minutes. I'm just going to cover it over lightly, okay, and we'll continue the story in 5 minutes if you can wait. So remember, there he is, final day he's baking something, salt no sugar, but he's still thinking, what am I going to do? How am I going to meet the requirements? So, we've rested our dough 5 minutes. Let's get back to the story. Well, he's thinking, what can I do with it? I've made a lightly salted dough, which I know the like of that one. You don't like sweet pastries. And he's sort of thinking, and he looks at him, there's his wife through the doorway, arms crossed. Time's running out, time's running out. And he's inspired. So, he chops the dough into 8 pieces. Try and get them even. Right? Chops them into 8 pieces. And he thinks, I know what I'm going to do. So, we're just going to roughly mould them into balls. Doesn't matter, they're not going to stay like that, obviously. All right? We're just going to roll them up into some balls, and that's a bit small, that one. And we're going to then let them rest a little bit again. Okay, so we're going to now just give them another 5 minutes. Not very even, some of these. Okay, we're just going to give them another little 5 minutes, and then we'll be ready to make the standard pretzel. Because, as you know, obviously it's like a rope, and it was the crossed arms that gave him the idea as how he was going to shape his dough. So remember, our monk, back in 610 I think it was, he was inspired supposedly by the arms of prayer of the children. Here's old Freda thinking about his wife. So 5 minutes. Okay, so there we've got our little balls. I'm just going to move them over so we've got some room for rolling. So, like I said, Freda had been inspired by his wife's crossed arms. So what he did is he took his ball of dough, and just like him, we're just going to roll this into about an 18-inch, there's air in it, rope, if you like. It wants to be slightly thicker in the middle, okay, tapering out towards the ends. Like I say, this is sticking very slightly, but it shouldn't stick that much. Feels like there's a great big air bubble trapped in that one. So, when we got it about 18 inches, which I'm not sure that is, okay, and like I say, just taper it off lightly at the end. It's a bit springy this, don't want to stay rolled out. What we do is we shape it, so I'm going to make that a bit thinner. We shape it into a U, okay, and we cross over our ends, okay, and we cross them over again. I don't know where you can see that, and then we fold it over. Actually, I'm just going to, before I do that, I'm going to make this a bit longer, because you can't see the 3 holes, which, remember, his instructions were he had to make it so the king, or count rather, would be able to see the sunshine through it 3 times a day. So there we go. It's quite an elastic dough, this, and it keeps sort of springing back out of shape. So I made my U, and I cross them, and I cross them again, and I'll bring them down and fold them over, lightly pressing the ends down onto the, to make my traditional pretzel shape. Now I'm just going to lay it on a baking sheet. We're not ready to bake yet, okay? So we're going to do this with each of these. So we're making about 8 pretzels, okay? And this is when we're then going to leave them once we've rolled them all out and shaped them, we will then let these sit in a warm place to let these rise. Okay, so it's roll it out nice and thin and long. The U, twist, fold over once, fold over twice, fold it down, and just attach the ends lightly to the base to give us our traditional 3-hold pretzel, so that the sun can shine through 3 times. Right? So you would think that was it now, because Alfredo, once he's made them all, he's going to bake them, and he is. Right? He's going to let them rise for a bit, and then he's going to bake them. But that's not the end of the story. So I'm going to leave you in suspense while I make the rest. Okay, rolling them out, slightly thicker in the middle, tapering off towards the end. Okay, U shape, twist, twist, fold back down, and there's our pretzel. Okay, so I'm going to continue making these, and then we're just going to cover them over and let them rise for about 45 minutes. So I'll catch you in about 45 minutes. Okay, so we've let them rise for about 45 minutes. They haven't risen an awful lot. Okay, we're not quite finished yet. Now, ideally, we now want to chill these in the refrigerator overnight, but really for 2 hours. We ain't going to do that long because I need to get on with the next stage. But I'm going to put them in a bit for a little bit in the fridge, and we're going to then start preparing for the baking. Okay. Now, obviously we need to put the oven on, but I'm not quite ready for that yet. We put the oven on about 400 degrees C. Okay. But I'm going to put that on a second, or in a bit, because before then we're going to add another special stage which came out supposedly by accident. So there was old Freda. He'd made his pretzels and he'd put them to rest and rise, and he'd got the oven on and he's all ready to bake them. And well, suddenly the cat got a bit excited, and his tray of pretzels, or his new bread things, fell off, and guess where they landed? Not just on the floor, straight in the bucket of boiling lye. His wife, to do a bit of cleaning, had got up a bucket of boiling lye. Now, lye is caustic soda or sodium hydroxide, depends how technical you want to be. Pretty nasty stuff, boiling. Well, you have to watch your eyes, won't have any left. Get in them. And they dunked in there, and he's like, oh, deadline. So he whisked them out really quick and just thought, I ain't got time, I can't make any more. Shove them in the oven. So that's what he did. So we, because of the result, which we'll come to, we are also going to boil these in alkali. Now, we ain't going to boil them in sodium hydroxide solution. That's a little bit dangerous, right? Instead, we're going to make up an alkaline solution using baking soda. So I'll show you how we do that. Okay, we're having it boiling, and these are going to be dumped in there, and if you like, almost like blanched for about 30 seconds in there. Okay, so we're going to get these chilling, and I'll come back to you when we're going to start the alkali blanch, if you like. Right, so I've got 200 litres, I've got 2 litres of water just coming up to the boil, and I've got about 70-75 grams of baking soda. Okay, when this is boiling, we're going to add that. Now we're going to need some salt. I've got some nice salt granules, pink Himalayan salt again. Okay, that will go sprinkled on top. Now, what we're going to be doing with our pretzels is, when this is boiling, we dunk each one in there for about 30 seconds, wick it out, and we're going to put it onto on a wire rack to begin with, Okay, so we can drain it, and obviously we don't want to end up getting our solution everywhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay down some sheets of kitchen towel. Okay, managed to buy a normal size one this time, if you remember the jumbo one we had before. Okay, so there's my wire rack. So we'll be bringing them out, quick drain off onto here just to drain, and then we'll be transferring them back onto them baking sheets where they'll be ready to go in the oven. Now the oven has just gone on, want that up to 200 degrees C, 400 degrees F roughly. Alright, and so really at this stage things are chilling. Like I say, really want 2 hours in there minimum. This is that are chilling, that's getting up to the boil. Once we're actually at that stage, we'll continue on. Okay, pretzels are out of the fridge, about to say out in the oven then. I'm just going to add in my baking soda. This is almost coming up to the boil. So basically what we're going to do is give them like an alkali dip, if you like, to replicate what supposedly happened all them years ago. And then we're going to take them out, like I say, drain them slightly. Well, I say drain them slightly, drain them. And then put them on the baking sheet, sprinkle with salt, like you normally get with your salt, and then they'll be ready to go in the oven. Now, they want about 17 minutes, so as usual, because my oven tends to cook these things a bit quicker, I will keep my eye on them. You want to, about halfway through cooking, just perhaps move the, or turn the baking trays round just to make sure that the heat is all nicely evenly distributed amongst it over them all. And we basically want them, they'll slightly rise a bit, hopefully, and they'll go brown on the outside. And that's partly due to this alkali dip, where it sort of gives it this sort of crisper crust, if you like, and it still stays soft in the middle. So, and that's what Fraser did. He bunged them in the oven, out they come, and they actually looked all right. So he took them off to the king, or count, so I keep calling him king, who was mightily impressed, because when he held them up, he could see the sun through the 3 different openings, and when he broke them, he was amazed at the texture inside, and he was amazed at the taste. So Fraser got off, and that supposedly was one version of how pretzels came about. So this is almost up to boil, so let's try one out. So I'm going to pick one of my pretzels up, drop it in, okay, not sure if that's quite boiling yet, okay, and we're going to give that about 30 seconds. So you'll notice it does start to rise up to the surface, okay, which is usually an indication it's had just about long enough. So I'm going to lift it out, put it on my wire rack so it can drain, and then we get our next one, and in it goes, and we're just going to continue like that, okay, giving them the dunk in there. That one looks like a smiley face looking at me from the bottom, can't see where you are. Up that one sort of starts to rise, there we go, that's done, out it comes, onto the rack, and so on. Okay, so I'm just going to do these, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about the pretzel before we put them in the oven. Okay, so that's my last one out. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take some of this salt and sprinkle it over each pretzel. Okay. And that will then be ready to pop into the oven. Okay, this one's was a bit larger, coming apart a little bit. Okay, just wash that off. And like I say, we're going to put that into the oven for up to about 17 minutes, but you'll need to just keep your eye on it, depends what your oven's like. Okay, halfway through, so after about 7 or 8 minutes, we're just going to, like I say, rotate them around in the oven just to make sure they're all evenly baking. So that's our pretzels ready for the oven. Catch them when they're done. So the pretzels are in. Okay, I've got a couple of minutes before I just swap the trays over, so I thought I'd just catch up a little bit more with the history. So like I say, there's numerous stories about where they came from, and obviously some pretzel development carried on in America, Philadelphia and places like that. In Austria, bakers, many have a lion holding a pretzel outside, and some of that stems from the legend that in 1510, when the bakers were working, as they were sort of like as dawn was coming up, getting ready for bread for the day, the Ottoman Turks were trying to get into the city, and they were tunnelling underground. Now they thought they'd get away with it, but unfortunately I reckon on the bakers, of course, were all up and working, and they heard the noise, alerted the authorities, and as such the city was saved. And so therefore the king awarded the city a unique coat of arms, which included the baker's pretzels. And as I said earlier as well, pretzels, there's obviously some sort of religious connection as to where they came from, because they are sort of tied up sometimes in religion. I've got a nice little thing at the end to tell you about. Some people even argue, was this a kind of a sort of a Lent sort of dish that you could eat for Lent? Again, you know, these are all stories, we don't really know what's true. So we're just coming up time to swap over. So I'll bit of pause here. So here we go. Let's check them out. There we go. Here's our first one. There's our second. Now, the crust on these has cracked a little bit. I don't know whether that's partly the fact that the alkali wash wasn't as, you know, obviously as intense as shoving it in a boiling load of lye, but yeah, certainly brown on the outside. They should be nice and sort of doughy on the inside. We'll just leave them on the baking sheet a little bit to cool, and then we'll transfer them onto the wire rack and we'll have a little taste. But I'm not going to taste them just yet, it's too bloody hot. So when we go to try them, I'll let you know. Okay, let's try it out. So, thin bit there, just break that bit there. You can see, nice and brown on the outside. It's doughy on the inside. Big lump of salt there, I'm not going to put that in my mouth. All I'll taste is the salt. I don't mind salt, but just going to check this out. Salty, but nice. So, there you have, for the late, non-existent but Oktoberfest, German pretzels. Enjoy.